Hi, good morning. We are here at Esteve, Institute for Innovation and Knowledge Management. We just finished a seminar by Esteve Almirall, who had a very interesting presentation about the strategies and design of platforms. Esteve, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me.
It was a pleasure. Before we jump to the subject of today's talk, could you give us a little bit of insights about who you are?
Well, I started and probably I did all my life as a computer engineer, and then I worked for kind of 2 decades in computer engineering, and mostly in Spain, but also outside Spain, and in areas like banking, consulting, and so on. I was lucky enough to develop one of the first online banking in Spain, the first that did transactions in Spain. And I was lucky enough to work on these areas. And I always wanted to go to academia, so at the end to pursue things in artificial intelligence and in this kind of areas and so on. So then I moved to UPC, and then I did work in a PhD in artificial intelligence and so on. But I was very interested in this mix between management and IT, this kind of new IT. And that's why I came to Esteve, and then I started to work in this mix in the area. And I ended up in open innovation, as you know. And after that, after open innovation, in the middle of open innovation, I kind of coming back to my roots and coming back to artificial intelligence, analytics, and so on. But I'm kind of in the middle, and this was my history.
So what keeps you going? I mean, such a great and such an interesting career in the industry. What keeps you hooked to academia?
Oh, well, I guess it's easy at the point you realize that time is limited, that your time is not infinite. So if you want to do things, you better do them, because if not, you won't be able to do these kind of things. And then, well, if you want to enter academia, I entered academia pretty old. I think it was my limit. Beyond that, it's very complicated. At least to enter in a competitive position, that you do research and so on. Everybody can teach, and academy is a mix of academics and professionals that teach together and bring knowledge there. But it's a different kind of thing if you are from the professional background and then you bring your experience, than if you try to do something in academics and then you bring your research. These are 2 different fields. And I always wanted to be in the first one. I was in the second one all my life, but I always wanted to be in the last one. So probably it's fear, time, this feeling that time is ending and you have to do something with your life if you want to do it.
So pursuing your passion.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Esteve, what is today's seminar about?
Oh, well, it's an interesting paper that we did with Sabine Brunswicken and Majork. And it's a very nice paper. It revolves around several questions, like we are in platforms, we all know platforms. We have iPhones, we have Androids, and we all know these platforms and apps and so on. And then there are things that puzzle us. One thing that passes us is the iPhone platform, for example, has more restrictions than the Android. You have to comply with so many norms, you have to comply with so many restrictions and so on. But even if these restrictions exist, they are more successful. In terms of the quality of the perception of the applications and the perception of the platform in global. How can that be? How something where you can explore less, where you are not limited, can be more successful? This is one insight. And the other insight is, well, we always go in this philosophy of you always have to pivot and change your strategy and try again, and failing is good and so on. And probably works. But for the majority of people, they fail. It has a huge social cost. Also has a huge social cost in terms of platform. Is that always good? Or is good only in certain conditions? These were the 2 main questions that went to this around this paper. And we found very nice answers, and I guess. I mean, the answer for this question is that, yeah, pivoting is good.
For the first one?
Yeah, pivoting is good.
Second one?
Second one. Pivoting is good. But if complexity is very high, if everything is very complicated and so on, most likely you will land in a worse place than you are. So pivoting is not that good. If complexity is medium, and by trying you can find good solutions, then pivoting is good, but not always, not if complexity is very high.
Can you give us an example of where would complexity be very high and pivoting just wouldn't be helpful as a methodology?
There are many, and now there are many because it's so popular. Now we have, it's so popular, this kind of markets in the winner takes all, where only few winners take the whole market. So when you compete in one of these markets, it's not a normal competition. It's not like a bakery in the street. The bakery in the street only has to perform better than the bakery in the next street.
What would be a good example of winner takes all market for our listeners who do not have?
Look, for example, in these winner takes all messengers. Messengers like WhatsApp, Messenger, like Signal, or like any of the messages that we use, that we have, and so on. Well, being the messenger number 10 means being a loser. You don't exist. You can only be either the first or the second, or you don't exist. Right. So in this kind of market, pivoting a lot, it's very complicated because probably you will find in a position that people don't like it. That happened a lot. Look at Facebook, how many failures they had. They changed a few things and they had to backtrack.
Because they're interdependent.
Because of the high interdependency. Right. And how difficult it is to find this spot where people like this idea that you had. And sometimes you find it by coincidence. and like Instagram, for example. But many times you just don't find them. And then pivoting in these spaces, is that good or not? And this will be a high complexity space. Right. It doesn't look like this because you say, well, messenger is easy. Well, designing a messenger that appeals and takes into consideration the interest and has these wide network effects that these have is not that easy. Yeah. In fact, very few manage to do that. Okay. On contrast, if you want another example, for example, I play a lot with the checkers game. It's very bad. I mean, the user interface is a disaster, and so, but I like checkers, and it's something, and I win. That's good. I win many times. That's good. Even if I put the highest level, I win many times. Which doesn't say a lot about the checkers game. Probably they can improve it a lot if I win so much. But well, I play it a lot. Well, it's not a nice game. The design can be improved. Everything can be improved. But come on, appeals to me and feels this fast game that I want to play 5 minutes and so on, and there's a rest of get out of everything and get out of thinking anything and just play checkers, and then we continue doing some other thing. Well, in this space, you have many possible checkers games, many possible apps that play checkers or do cooking or do this kind of thing. You don't have to be the best. So you don't have to aim for this. And then pivoting can work or cannot work, and it's a different game. So these are the two examples of a high complexity and a low complexity game.
And what about the first implication that you mentioned, which is the constraints?
Oh, right? The constraints.
Can you tell us, because that's counterintuitive. Yeah. One would imagine the less constraints, the more possibilities, choices as a user, you would be happier. But it turns out from your research that might not be. Yeah, this is a
very interesting one, or very funny one, because it's so counterintuitive. You say, come on, you put more constraints, how on earth people can do better? Because you put more constraints. But the matter of the fact is that if you look at platforms like iOS, they put quite a lot of constraints, and then people do better applications. Why this happens? I mean, our research shows that what happens is that the space of search, the number of points that you can search by putting constraints is reduced. So you can search better. So because you search better, you can find better positions. Of course, if you were able to find the best possible position in this space without constraints, then it would be unbeatable. But you cannot, because it's too big. When you put some constraints, you reduce the space, so you facilitate search. So people can do better search than when you don't put constraints. So it's this tension on how big is the space, how many constraints you put, and then as a result, how good are you performing in search. And in some middle level of complexity, you perform much better. And many of the apps that we work on are in this middle level of complexity. There are not so many apps that are very highly complex or very low complex. Many are in this middle level of complexity. So constraints work in the favor of Apple.
So in a way, they are kind of channeling focus and helping to simplify the strategy, the design of the app makers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Wonderful.
So it's an interesting, because we always think in this mindset that constraints are bad. Well, not always. Many times constraints. And you can see that in many different environments, not only in this environment. When we go to creativity, we again see that putting some constraints facilitates having ideas. It's the same phenomenon. The search space is reduced. So you cannot think about all these enormous amount of possibilities. You have to think in a small. So you can consider many of these possibilities and you can search better.
Fantastic.
That's the point.
What's next? I mean, this is a great milestone, a paper published in MISQ. What comes after?
Well, in these lines, I think there are two lines that I'm very interested on. I mean, the first line is how do we innovate? And we know a lot about incremental innovation. We know a lot since long, and we know how to manage incremental innovation very well, but we know so little of radical innovation.
Absolutely.
And the latest research show that we even know less than we
thought
we knew. That's the latest research. So in this case, we still use paradigms, or we model things in terms of a wide, of a random jump, and then we change some characteristics of the product, but we really don't know. That doesn't happen. There is an aspect of social construction of knowledge that it's very important now because the world is connected and the internet is connected and so on, that affects the individuals, and how the social construction of knowledge helps the individuals to search. That is not taken into consideration, and this is one area that I want to work. Also in this social construction, in this paper we work a lot with social aspirations. Aspirations that are not constructed by the individual. It's not the individual, the agent, the developer that has an aspiration level, but that depend on the environment where they are, keeping up with the Jones, if you want to put it in this way. But this is this social aspiration level. Also, we would like to work more in this construction of social aspirations level, and how can we help it? Because the developers now are pretty blind. They don't have much information about what could be a good aspiration level, what could be a good strategy for search, if pivoting a lot, if pivoting less, and so on, because platforms don't provide this information. And probably we will have a better platform if platforms help developers a little bit more in this area of social construction, aspirations, pivoting or not, and so on. And this is something that they can do.
Very interesting. So from the perspective of an innovator, in this context, app developer, what you're looking at is to shed light on that dynamic between what he does, how he innovates, whether he pivots or not, and how the knowledge base on the level of the industry or the app space works. And then also how he's guided by what he considers to be the aspirational level or the goal. Let's put it that way.
We know very little in innovation on how to manage ecosystems of innovation. So people want to have agency, people that is not in our payroll, people that we cannot influence directly, because they have their own interests, they are companies, they are part of a platform, people that we can only influence the motivations, the interests of these people, but we don't have a direct influence of them. We know very little. Most of the way that we work with this type of innovation is let one flowers bloom, increase capabilities in terms of having more educated people, having better developers, and so on, and hope for the best.
Right.
Of course, probably we can do better. And this is the question, how we can do better.
Fantastic. Esteve, thank you very much. This was very helpful. And Yeah, we look forward to seeing your future work and seeing you as a presenter on
Thank
the
you so
upcoming
much for inviting me.
seminars.
Thank you.
Thanks.